Lough, or plunged through. For 'twas two lads cutting rushes plunged their sickle through it. The hollow thud of bronze, unearthed ceremonial shield and sun sign offering to the goddess Anya, who lives beneath Lough watching the surface. And my grandmother conceived by this shore, and my mother was born. But before that, Paddy and Nora skated on the frozen loch only for Nora to plunge through, pulled up by the hair by my grandfather after she had already given up. And Nora maintained she felt the goddess, Anya, pulling her down to her depths, an enticing urge. And I can feel my grandmother sinking in this lake, letting go of her young love and her future family and feeling that it could be good to leave this world, confident in her savedness. This prehistoric space where each undulation is a hoard and treasure lies among the rushes, once a holy offering, Lough, beneath Knockany, Lough, beneath Knockadoon, that birthed my mother and spared hers. For it was two lads cutting rushes. Two lads cutting rushes plunged their sickle through it, the hollow thud of bronze unearthed, ceremonial shield and a sun sign, an offering to the goddess Anya, who lives beneath Lough watching the surface. And my grandmother conceived by this shore, and my mother was born. But before that, Paddy and Nora skated on the frozen loch only for Nora to plunge through, pulled up by the hair by my grandfather after she had already given up. And Nora maintained that she felt the goddess, Anya, pulling her down to her depths, an enticing urge. And I can feel my grandmother sinking in this lake, letting go of her young love and her future family, and feeling that it could be good to leave this world, confident in her savedness. And this prehistoric space where each undulation is a hoard and treasure lies among the rushes. Treasure lies among the rushes, once a holy offering, Lough beneath Knockany, Lough beneath Knockadoon, that birthed my mother and spared hers. That's a poem that exercises powers that are free to all of us to use. Connecting with the unmet, unknown ancestors when you're from Ireland is a dangerous thing. There's a lot of them. But all of us are from a huge line of unmet ancestors, and even scarier than that is connecting or even speaking for the met ancestors, the ones we have known, the ones that have known us, and the ones that have passed on. Another power exercised in that poem is the use of my poetic imagination to speak through my grandmother for myself. And I can feel my grandmother sinking in this lake, letting go of her young love and her future family, and feeling that it could be good to leave this world, confident in her savedness. I was using her mouth, her voice, to speak my own reluctance to be in the world, to live a life at that time. And there's grief for those who have died, and there's a finality in that grief and even a relief in that grief because they're gone, they're not coming back. The rational mind understands that. But when we're grieving something that has died within us, like a grief for a desire to live life, It feels like it can return at any moment, so that grief is even more visceral. If a desire has dissipated, has died in your life, and everyone is saying, don't worry, it'll come back. Whereas when you're grieving a person who has died, nobody says, don't worry, they'll come back. So losing a strand of emotion inside of you is actually a more visceral and harder grief in many ways. Losing a desire to live, suffering from that dissipation. Losing hope. Of course, many of us lose empathy for large chapters of our life as well. And it's a gruesome, cruel part of the road. So that's Lough plunged through, and using that poetic imagination is really why you're here, actually. When I look at you all, I see a group of people who have turned away from everyone else to remind themselves that there's no self at all. That the temple of the self, especially performing with David here in Manhattan, the temple of the self, with every building looking down going, you are somebody. I often think Oprah is going to kick in the door. You're somebody. You're somebody. Everybody's somebody. And Manhattan does that to us, and that's why we feel so alive here and so prescient, the feeling of turning away to find this stillness. And it's wonderful to bring you a place that's always been a really good friend to me since I was a child, Lough, to bring you that stillness that exists in that place, to bring you that horizon that exists in that place for me. If you want, someday I'll meet you there. And of course, we tell ourselves many things to make ourselves visible in the world. And I tell myself all sorts of strange things to get myself on stage, you know. Like, you look great. Or else the little thing, what would they want to hear from the likes of you and the likes of a place like this? But often one of the things I tell myself, and I recommend you tell yourself this as well, before you make yourself visible in the world, in whatever way we do it, because we have to do it sometimes. Don't underestimate your audience. Don't underestimate your audience. We're constantly underestimating everyone in our lives. The closer they are to us, the more we underestimate them, actually. But to use that brilliant American colloquialism, which has now become a global catchphrase, you're all grown-ass men and women. And you're going to understand what I'm doing. But we have to remind ourselves, you know, that people are going to understand what you're doing. You don't have to spoon feed them. And then, of course, there's the other end of the spectrum at a David Whyte event where you have to to get yourself on stage, you have to say, now, don't overestimate this crowd, you know. One person's not going to have a clue what you're talking about. You can take comfort in that. But anyway, I won't keep you for much longer from the maestro, and my brother is going to read a poem as well for you. But there's a poem I'll dedicate to all of you who have turned away from the temple of the self, the madness outside the door. And it's called The Virtuoso. And the virtuoso, of course, is a word that has been kind of ghettoized in our lives. Its literal translation is someone who's excellent mechanically at something, you know, like one of the great, and it's usually used for the artistic ways of life. Like one of the great incarnations of virtuosity is the 18th century violinist Paganini, who was said to have sold his soul to the devil for his abilities on the violin. But he actually sold it to me. No, he didn't. But I want to kind of rehabilitate the word virtuosity, you know, because like a real virtuoso will not be actually necessarily excellent at something. But I think the real virtuosity I've seen in the world are often from children, actually, who come on stage and give their gifts freely. Because that's an essential part of virtuosity. You wouldn't have found, I never saw Paganini live, but you wouldn't have found him coming up going, sure, I learnt this one and sure, we'll give it a go. You know, he would have stood up, he would have taken it out, he would have looked at you, and he would have knocked you dead. Because virtuosity is something that you give freely, and it's a courageous thing to do. So this poem is it's really an admonition to myself, and it's from the perspective of an audience. And really it's a mirror to ourselves, and it's called the Virtuoso. Because we don't care if you're sorry. We don't care if you're sorry. Nor do you even anymore. Why atone for your gifts? Express remorse for your ability, begging pardon in public. Be instead the unrepentant virtuoso, for it is you who choose to stand, showing us the Spirit stir, then fill and overflow within you. The Spirit does not ask forgiveness nor permission. And upon your stage you can do no wrong. Get out of the way. Get out of the way. We love what you have and need no reminder of our sentence here on earth. Please, just set us free. Because we don't care if you're sorry. And nor do you even anymore. And why atone for your gifts? Express remorse for your ability, begging pardon in public. Be instead the unrepentant virtuoso, for it is you who choose to stand, showing us the Spirit stir, then fill and overflow within you. The Spirit does not ask forgiveness nor permission, and upon your stage you can do no wrong. Get out of the way. Get out of the way. We love what you have and need no reminder of our sentence here on earth. We need no reminder of our sentence here on earth. Please, just set us